He's our 3 seed. O'Donnell is our 7. That means the boss will be on the play. And we'll see if the cool and calm and collected gentleman from Louisiana can keep it going.
Yeah, Tom gets to be on the play. So this is a game 1, which I think is probably Tom's best game for him. He's on the play. He's playing a combo deck. Usually things get worse for him after sideboard. He'd love to just rattle off a quick win here.
Yeah, I think, I do think game 1 favors him, especially with him on the play. I think that's a great place to be, and it just gives himself a bit of advantage. His dazes are a little bit better, stuff like that, so he can actually set the tone for the game. Just see him sacrifice the Tropical Island. He's going to put a threat right on the table. Right now, it's Glistener Elf.
Yeah, so Glistener Elf, I mean, a great aggressive 1-drop here. The question will be whether or not Devon can kill it. On the play, probably not. He'd have to provide some sort of blocker, but no play, that's got to be pretty good for Tom.
Yeah, just a boring little polluted Delph before passing the turn back. You see Tom's hand. He's got a Noble Hierarch, a Force of Will, a Daze over there, Inkmoth Nexus 2. If you've ever played against an effect before, be it in Legacy or Modern, it's a very, sinking feeling when they start off with, Glistener Elf, and you're just like, oh no, already?
Oh, no.
I better get moving.
Yeah, it's... All right, then 2 poison in already.
It's just kind of scary to play against. You can die at, any moment.
Yeah, I mean, you do a check on your hand immediately. It's like, okay, how much removal do I have? How fast can I cast it?
Yeah, I need to get blockers out there. Hopefully I have removal spell. Can I interact with them appropriately? Some decks can't do it at all. This list of Bug Delver for O'Donnell can do it. Not a ton, not as much as Shardless Bug. So again, I wouldn't be surprised to see Devon maybe take some aggressive mulligans in this matchup as well, as he already does have 2 Infect here on the second turn of the game.
And the good news with Glistener Elf is you can usually block it. None of the pump spells give trample. Yep. So if you can just get anything on the board, you often can trade with him. But that's where cards like Blighted Agent and Inkmoth just become really scary, is because they have evasion on top of having Infect.
It's an early Brainstorm. So O'Donnell will draw 3 cards. Going to have to put 2 back here in just a moment.
Well, if he doesn't find Disfigure, he's not going to be able to kill this Glistener Elf. All his 1-drop creatures are Deathrite Shaman and Delver of Secrets, and because of that Noble Hierarch, Glistener Elf could just swing through them.
So we'll see how O'Donnell wants to put back here. Again, this is the end of Ross's turn, I believe. So he'll resolve this Brainstorm, put the 2 cards back, untap. He'll draw a card that, of course, he already knows about. It's a copy of Spell Pierce. There's a Verdant Catacomb, so going to make the other card go away. We'll see what land he wants to search for and what he wants to do on his second turn of the game.
Yeah. Devon's being punished here for having a hand that has a lot of setup, but not a lot of action early on. Bug Delver has just as low of a curve as Infect has, so it's not going to fall behind on how many cards did you play, but it matters what kind of cards you're playing. Both players have cast 2 spells, but one person has cast 2 creatures, and I mean, it looks like Devon's going to set up to cast 2 Brainstorms.
This is a Tarmogoyf, and Tom is going to quickly attempt to daze that, so we'll see if this gets the job done.
If he has a force, Devon has to force back here. I don't believe he does, though.
Now that's telling, right? Because Devon took a moment to kind of sift through his hand, and then that doesn't, the daze resolves, Tarmogoyf does not resolve. Tarmogoyf goes to the graveyard here. If you're Tom, you probably pick up a little bit of information there, right? If he had a Force of Will, chances are he probably forces the daze.
I mean, he has to force the daze. This is already a really scary spot to be in. To keep pace with Infect, you oftentimes just cast your spells as quickly as possible, and you hope that they do something. Force would be another thing you could cast there just to win this early counter war. But because Devon didn't have, he needs to have early things that impact the board, not just early things that draw cards.
Ross going to attack here with Glistener Elf, and now he's going to deploy a Blight Agent too. So now he's got 3 creatures with Infect in play. He'll pass the turn back, and again, because he knows the deck list and what he's playing against, a card like Toxic Deluge, don't have to worry about that. So he can really extend all of these creatures out there. And it is also game number 1, so a card like Golgari Charm, don't have to worry about that either.
Yeah, just as you said, in the main deck, Bug Delver has no sweepers, and Tom actually doesn't need the pump spells as much in this matchup as he does in others. He can actually just do things like this where he plays out 3 Infectors and kind of challenges Devon to kill all of them. His deck's probably not up to the task.
We talked about how his hand has mostly setup. Here's another Brainstorm. Brainstorm, one could argue, is the best card in Legacy. It's not the best right now, though, because Devon is under the gun. He needs to find answers. Doesn't have really a lot of time to manipulate. This is a Deathrite Shaman. That's not so bad. That can kind of get in the way a little bit here.
Yeah, and if I'm Tom, I don't think I even give him the chance to interact in combat. I probably want to swing something like a Blighted Agent or an Inkmoth Nexus and just keep this plan going. It's 2 Infect a turn, and it doesn't look like Devon can stop it.
Here's a Brainstorm from Tom. So he's going to get a little deeper into his deck. You see a Force of Will, a Tropical Island, and another copy of Inkmoth Nexus. Tom, in his hand, no pump spells, a couple copies of Force. He's also got a Daze and then 3 lands, so I'll have to put a couple back here.
Had he found a pump spell, he would have lethal right here. He would have the lethal pump plus force and daze backup. Unlikely Devon can contest.
This is an attack for 2. Of course, unblockable is the Blighted Agent, so up to 6. There's another Infect creature, an Inkmoth Nexus, pass the turn back. Devon's going to go down to 17 his life total. Generally, this matchup does not matter, so I suppose that's a bonus, as he does search up an Underground Sea.
Yep. And yeah, he's at 6 poison. And look at this, 4 creatures in play. Devon only has 5 kill spells in his main, and 4 of them can't hit Inkmoth. So the only way to deal with Inkmoth actually is to cast Delver of Secrets and flip it. And he just doesn't have enough turns to do that.
There is certainly some assembly required with that approach, as Devon will take a look at his hand here and try to figure out what to do on the 4th turn of this game.
You see a bunch of spell pierces. It stops him from getting killed by pump spells, but pump spells were never really the issue.
It's a 3rd Brainstorm here. A couple of Stifles been picked up here for O'Donnell. Again, he'll have to put a couple cards back, and while he does have a Verdant Catacombs in his hand to make this what we like to call a perfect Brainstorm. Again, Tom doesn't really have to do much else this game. He's got a pretty nice foundation, and it's Devon's job to actually stop it from killing him.
Yeah, Devon's cards just don't line up very well here. Were Devon playing against Miracles, for example, this would be a very good hand.
He'd be doing pretty good. Truth be told.
Stifle your lands, spell pierce your spells, cast some Brainstorms to keep doing this forever. It'd be great. But on the back foot, these cards all get significantly worse.
I think he'd be doing really well in a Delver Mirror too.
Yeah, that would be great. Anything where he would be, if he were ahead on the board, his hand would be pretty good.
You're going to see a Stifle there on the fetch lane right away. Tom's going to fire up the Inkmoth Nexus, and he's going to serve in here with 1 on the ground, 2 in the air. It looks like maybe we're going to stifle one of the Inkmoth activations. Yeah, so he's going to stifle one of the activations. So Tom was a little hasty there. Stifle will slow this down a little bit.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's a use for Stifle, but the bad news for Devon is, like, it doesn't even buy him a turn.
Yeah. So what this does is this stifles the activation. Tom says, I'll pay a life to activate Inkmoth Nexus, and that's not going to work. So that's fine. And so now we will see what happens here.
And we may be waiting for a second here to see on how this plays.
Yeah, what I think actually Tom is considering is maybe I'm going to force a Will or Stifle on my Inkmoth Nexus because I want that 1 point of Infect right now. We also have the potential here for a Daze because this allows Tom to actually pick up this land, replay it, and activate the Nexus again.
Exactly. So Devon probably just chooses to not pay here. No real reason to. He may daze the daze.
little game inside the game.
Yeah. Tom has 0 floating right now. He has a virtual 1 mana.
But he does have those Inkmoths in play that he can pay for. But ideally he wants to attack with those, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, he could pay for the daze, but you have to use an Inkmoth to pay for the daze, which somewhat defeats the point of paying for the daze in the first place.
Yeah.
Since we're fighting over a Stifle.
Now, all of this may have just been in the attack step as well, so Tom doesn't have the ability to play his land right now. So at the end of the day, what you're going to see is an attack here for 2 yet again. He'll put the Inkmoths back and just simply pass the turn back. O'Donnell will draw a card to copy a Tarmogoyf. That's pretty late to the party. Tarmogoyf's going to join the party. There's a Trop. This is an activation of Inkmoth Nexus. Again, Tom knows that he has to play around precisely 1 card right now, which is Disfigure. Yeah, and that is going to do it. Tom Ross is going to win game number 1 here over Devon O'Donnell. Infect takes game number 1 against Bug Delver. I think we can say pretty predictably there.
Predictably, pretty commandingly. I think what Devon, especially game 1, he can't really defend against Infect, so his best defense is a good offense. And he wished, ideally, he would have a hand with a turn 1 Delver in it. He can use some blockers, maybe some of his counter spells to stop Tom from pump spelling. He can't stop Tom from attacking, but maybe then Devon can race him in the air or something like that. But when he has a hand that starts on fetch lands and brainstorms and spell pierces, he's not going to play defense forever. He can't do that. And without an offense, like, Tom will kill him. His deck does do something.
Let's bring it back to the booth here as we are going to ask our trivia question right now. Now, of course, our semifinals are kind of long, so we'll ask it after game one of this. We'll also ask the same question after game one of our other semifinal matches in case you guys do miss it. Now, the question here between me and you,
all right,
who wants to ask the question?
I have one ready.
Okay,
right.
Perfect.
So we're going to talk about Tom Ross's Infect deck. I always kind of like this deck because it reminds me of like block. Like, I like how it definitely comes out of a block. Like, he has a ton of cards from New Phyrexia in the set. But, you know, you see Blighted Agent, Glistener Elf, these cards all from the same set. But what I'm looking for is the one card that uses the hallmark of that set. And that set was known for Phyrexian mana. It's definitely how it had the impact in Legacy. So I'm looking for which Phyrexian mana spell is Tom Ross playing in his Infect deck.
Name that card, hashtag with the hashtag of SCG Premium on Twitter. Make sure you're following at SCG Live. And as usual, we will announce the winner at the conclusion of our semifinal round. A little bit down the road, so we will ask the question again at the end of game number one of the other semifinal match. But for right now, we turn our attention back to our match. So we can take a look at the sideboards here to see if things get better for O'Donnell. You're going to see a sideboard there, a Cage, a Needle, True Name Nemesis, a Sylvan Library, 2 Envelops, a Force of Will, a Maelstrom Pulse, 2 Thoughtseize, 2 Toxic Deluge, and most importantly, I think you could say, 2 Disfigures.
Yeah, so we saw there a real inability on Devon's side to be able to defend against the combo because he couldn't really kill creatures. Now, he's not going to be able to do the thing that a lot of bug decks can do where they just have a stack of removal post board. He's still going to need to attack. He's going to need to be proactive. But a couple additional removal spells will give him a lot more time to do that. So you're absolutely right. Disfigure is pretty good here. Toxic Deluge is also very good. We may see a couple other cards come in. Pithing Needle can take care of Inkmoth Nexus. It's not great, but Inkmoth is a really big issue for this deck. The only removal spells he has for Inkmoth, you know, the Deluges and the Abrupt Case don't work. It's just Disfigure or Bust. It's Disfigure or, well, block with Insectile Aberration. Neither of which you want. If you're blocking with that guy, you're probably losing. So I imagine we'll see those. He has 2 Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize is, I mean, this is a combo deck at the end of the day, and what I like about Thoughtseize is that it costs 1 mana, which is pretty much the right mana cost for this matchup. I think information is important, and getting that card is pretty good. I would use those 2 if I were him.
On Tom's side, 2 Necropede, 2 Rest in Peace, a Sylvan Library, Force of Will, a Hydroblast, 2 Crows and Grips, a Nature's Claim, a Piracy Charm, a Spell Pierce, 2 Swords of Plowshares with his White Splash, and then a Caracas. Anything you like here, does he have to change very much?
Well, Necropede is very good in these small tempo creature mirrors because Devon has to counter race. You know, they both are going to be attacking with creatures. And because Tom's creatures have Infect, which works a lot of ways like Double Strike, all the damage counts double. Tom's usually winning that race, so at some point Devon often has to block. And when you have a card like Necropede, when he dies, he throws a -1/-1 counter on something. That can really turn the tide of a race. I like Necropede in this matchup a lot for Tom.
Yeah, I presume that Tom won't change a lot in his deck. I think the matchup is pretty good for him, given the texture of O'Donnell's list. Again, he doesn't have a ton of interaction. You know, I wouldn't be surprised to see Tom maybe board in a card like Nature's Claim here, just because Pithing Needle is a slight annoyance, and Inkmoth Nexus is so good in the matchup for Tom. You know, just a small thing. Nothing major, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it.
Yeah, I don't think there's much else he wants to do here. We saw him board in Sylvan Library against Sneak and Show, which I didn't expect to have happen, but it was pretty good. If he anticipates that, it depends how much removal he thinks is too much removal. Like, if Bug Delver gets upward of 10 kill spells, it's like any deck that gets upward of 10 kill spells, it's probably Sylvan Library time if you're Tom, because you need to find additional threats. I don't think the removal spell count on Devon's deck is high enough to justify playing Sylvan Library, because there is a cost, right? You're playing a 2-mana spell that doesn't actually affect the board. All it does is it fixes draws some cards. If it doesn't, in a race, it doesn't do anything. You're casting 2 mana for something that doesn't change a race. I don't think Tom wants to do it, but he still may prove me wrong and board it in.
For O'Donnell, you know, we can talk all day long about how difficult this matchup is for him, and it's pretty gosh darn difficult. I think this is a situation, if you're him, you have to get a little creative with the sideboarding, maybe a little creative with the mulligans, take some aggressive ones. Desperate times, desperate measures, I think, for him.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's, like, I think there's stuff like boarding in Pithing Needle or something he's going to have to do. Board Pithing Needle, hope Tom draws some Inkmoths. Tom doesn't have that many creatures, so if you can snag a couple of them, say you snag a couple Inkmoths with that Pithing Needle, It can really change a game.
Yeah, Sylvan Library, I think, is going to come in for him because he's got plenty of life to pay to get extra cards. Disfigure is obvious. You know, do you want a card like Force Will? Do you want an expensive answer to a card in Maelstrom Pulse that can take care of a boring old Glistener Elf or Blighted Agent? I think the answers to these questions are probably yes. I think he does have to get a little creative here because, again, when the matchup is really bad for you, you have to give yourself the best chance to win. And I think you maybe take some lines you probably wouldn't take.
I mean, absolutely. And I thought you brought up a great point here with Sylvan Library. So, kind of what I was saying before, both these decks have some in their board. And when a matchup is slow or full of removal spells, you want to board them in. And that's not really what this matchup is for Devon. So you think, hey, Library's in the sideboard. Except then you go back to the fact that, wait, Tom doesn't even deal damage to you. So when you play Sylvan Library, you can just immediately draw 3 cards the next turn. That's probably a card that's good in any matchup. So I think he boards it in just off the fact that he has so many life points to spend.
Yeah. I think that world exists.
Yeah, it's not the intended use of the card, you know, but it's a draw 3 for 2. Yep, it's pretty good.
It's time to take a look at the boss's grip. He has a Savannah, a Noble Hierarch, 2 copies of Blighted Agent, along with an Invigorate, a Vine to the Vastwood, and a Spell Pierce.
This is a risky keep, so it's got a lot of good things going for it, right? It has Vines, Invigorate, so it has 8 points of pump, a counter spell, and 2 Infectors, and a turn 1 Hierarch. A bunch of great things. However, if Devon has a Daze or a Disfigure in his opener, this hand could really fall flat. It's a 1-lander, and if that Noble Hierarch he doesn't get to untap with it, Tom is in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, it could be a pretty bad hand. We'll see how things do kind of come together for Ross, as O'Donnell's going to sacrifice the Verdant Catacombs. He's down to 17 now. We'll see how he wants to lead out here. It could be a Thoughtseize, maybe a Ponder, perhaps even everybody's favorite 1/2 Elf in Deathrite Shaman. And there it is.
That's the guy. Deathrite into play. But the real big moment will be whether or not this Noble Hierarch gets to survive. If you're Devon, he has Force of Will and a Spell Pierce here. I would be inclined to Force of Will the Noble Hierarch.
It's hard to pass up, I think. It really is.
His hand is so soft to it. And actually, I'm somewhat surprised on Tom's keep because of the fact, okay, Daze gets you, Force gets you, Disfigure gets you, Abrupt Decay gets you. That's like 16 or so cards. Here's the thing. The Noble Hierarch is probably has a way to kill a Noble Hierarch. I think Devon only really kills it with some of those cards if he knows what Tom's hand is.
And he does now.
And now he does now. He probably Disfigure it or Daze it no matter what. I don't know if he'd just snap Abrupt Decay it no matter what. Or force it.
He does have an Abrupt Decay in his hand, so we'll see what the decision-making process is here for O'Donnell as Ross does deploy the Noble Hierarch. He considered briefly playing the Glistener Elf that he did draw for the turn, but he opted against it. So now O'Donnell, again, does have that Force of Will, has the Sylvan Library, has an Abrupt Decay over there as well. We'll see what he wants to do on this turn. He's going to start by casting a Ponder.
I mean, and I like this so much. There's so many good things he could find. Wasteland. I was going to say if he finds Wasteland, it's great. I was going to say Daze is pretty good. Well, then he went Daze, Wasteland up the Ponder. So, yeah. Devon, I think this is going to be one of those games where Delver's on the play and they never let their opponent play Magic.
They do the Delver thing?
Yeah, the Delver thing where they just take all your lands, they counter, they don't let you play your cards.
It's certainly a strategy that he can employ, given that he knows the texture of Tom's hand. Again, he knows everything that's over there besides that Glistener Elf. He knows about the 2 Blighted Agents, the Invigorate, the Vines of the Vastwood, and the Spell Pierce. So he's going to shuffle with the Ponder. Surprise you a little bit?
I really wanted the Wasteland against this 1-lander. Yep. I mean, there's a downside. You have to take all these Dazes. He has a different outlook on this matchup. I think he wants more threats.
Let's see what he draws. Another copy of Ponder.
But yeah, I'm very surprised.
He could fire off that Ponder.
He doesn't have another
land.
land.
Yeah.
So now he's going to let all this mana live. Tom's going to get to untap and cast 2 drops. Oh my goodness. I would have wanted to kill 1 land. I would have wanted to either kill the Hierarch or the land. Tom kept a 1-lander. I want to punish him real bad for that.
He's got the opportunity to again, and he didn't keep it the last one, he's going to keep this Wasteland. Draws Wasteland, takes down the Savannah.
You are playing with fire, Mr. O'Donnell.
It's a little risky. It's a little risky.
Yeah, it is a little risky.
Here's a Glistener Elf. So that comes in for Ross.
So gets to cast something off the Noble Hierarch. Yeah, now I would think that Devon's going to kill everything.
So he's got a Deathrite and a Delver. So he's building a bit of a board here. Tom draws a copy of Inkmoth Nexus.
All right. So Devon, he had a choice to make there. He could have time walked himself to Abrupt Decay the Noble Hierarch and put Tom onto 0 mana. Instead, he chose to develop his own mana base with another Deathrite.
Here's Inkmoth. There's an attack for 2.
Yeah. But there's a huge danger here. By not taking the Noble Hierarch, he's allowed Tom to work his way up to 2 mana and enable the rest of his hand. So say the Noble Hierarch was gone, Tom would have 1 land, and it would be 1 colorless land. He would just have to play the land and say go, not getting to play anything.
See if Tom wants to cast Invigorate here. This would be an interesting spot to do. Actually, he can't cast Invigorate here because he's in a forest. So I take that back. Unable to do that. Well, okay. Well, I suppose I'll take that back because he could crop rotate his Inkmoth Nexus into a forest if he wants to.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of play you hold up in case Devon wastelands you. But an interesting, yeah, Tom plays nothing here, it seems.
And nothing in the attack. Again, can't Invigorate until he actually has a forest in place, so he'd have to crop rotate into a forest to be able to cast Invigorate for free. So just 2 Infects going to come across, and now we'll see what he wants to do in his second main phase. Has the option to cast the Blighted Agent here, but he might take another path. Yeah, and he's just going to pass the turn back.
Well, he is dealing 2 poison a turn, and before this Delver had flipped, Tom was actually winning the race. Now it's not as clear if he's winning it, but how fascinating, right? You're stuck on 1 land, you finally hit 2, you have a handful of 2-drops, and you say go. I'm not, and it's probably the right play.
Yeah. It would not surprise me. Tom has been playing Infect for some time. When I watch him play this deck, trust me, I learn a lot. He takes creative lines that have worked out for him quite a bit over the past year. You saw Force of Will get revealed to the Delver Secrets. It flips it into, of course, Insectile Aberration. So he's got the 3/2 out there.
Yeah. See if he goes for that Abrupt Decay now. Looks like it. The Deathrite gets rid of Wasteland. Yeah,
now he's going to take down the Noble Hierarch.
Yeah, he's going to go after Tom's mana.
Tom is going to cast Defiance of the Vastwood.
That's why Tom's leaving his card. This is great. This is why Tom's leaving up all this mana. He prizes his mana sources very highly in this matchup.
Now, Donald could have fought over that, but he elected not to. He has Force of Will. Now, there are no lands in the graveyard for him to remove with the Deathrite Shaman, but he could have Force of Will if he wanted to, elected not to, trying to pick a better spot with the free counter spell.
Yeah, Devon's actually he's on fewer land sources now than Tom is. You see exiled cards there, Wasteland and Savannah. And Tom's not that far from winning it. If you look at this, there's an Invigorate in his hand. He has another Vines. Doesn't have the second green yet, but he can crop rotate into it if he chooses to.
And of course, crop rotating into the forest will allow the Invigorate to be cast for free. So things get a little bit interesting, but he says, all right, just 2. Put you up to 4 Infect. And now it's a Blighted Agent.
Yeah, there's no pressure here though, right? So Ross is at 17 and Delvin has 4 poison on him. Ross is just winning this race. He doesn't have to do anything. And Devon, once again, is in the situation where he doesn't have kill spells for these creatures. Like, I don't think Devon's going to win the race.
It doesn't look great. I mean, Delver Secrets might have to hang tough, but now the Blighted Agent's out there. Maybe it has to keep attacking. And so Donald will draw a card for the turn.
Yeah, he draws Daze, but here's the thing. Every turn, Tom's just going to be like, creature go, creature go. And I'm just, both of them have a bunch of creatures, and I think if everything attacks, yeah, Tom will kill Devon first.
There's another copy of Inkmoth Nexus.
Great draw.
O'Donnell putting the pressure on 3 points at a time with the Insectile Aberration. Again, Ross down to 14 life, but as you mentioned, the race does favor Tom at this point. Tom only has to deal 10, where O'Donnell has to deal 20.
Yeah.
It's part of the benefit of playing Infect.
With Deathrite, O'Donnell you could say O'Donnell is dealing 5 a turn. He's willing to activate Deathrite. But Tom can start chumping with Inkmoth and hitting with Blighted Agent.
Sure.
So, whereas Blighted Agent, I mean, there's no blocking that guy. That's a 3-turn clock.
An attack with the Blighted Agent, the Exalted Trigger. It's an attempt for 2 more Infect for O'Donnell. Let's see if there's anything he can attempt to do about this. You see the hand again. 2 copies of Force of Will hanging out over there. The Sylvan Library there as well. Unfortunately for O'Donnell, no lands in the graveyard at this point. So those Deathrite Shamans, not fully powered.
Yeah. I mean, if Devon had more mana in play right now, I think the race would be going in his favor. There's enough things in the graveyard for Devon to activate these Deathrites all the time.
Tom going to cast a crop rotation.
I was going to say Tom's being very patient here by not going for the kill. Now he's going for it. There are some danger here. So for starters, Tom just put a land in the graveyard.
Yep.
So that's a mana for Devon. And while Devon didn't have any removal, Devon does have counter spells. He can fight over this one.
Oh, we're going to have a battle.
Yeah.
Because, well, if we don't, Devon's dead. So we're going to have a battle.
This is going to happen. The question is the battle going to be over the Invigorate or the crop rotation? And it looks like the answer is the Invigorate. Tom's going to be pretty happy with that, because even if he loses, he wins in that he now has colored mana.
Yeah, here's a Tropical Island. Again, now Invigorate's free. Of course, Invigorate, the alternate casting cost, you have to control a forest and give your opponent 4 life.
I wonder if Devon wanted to fight over the crop rotation instead. But yeah, Invigorate, he's going to go for lethal.
Well, 2 mana available to pay for a card like Spell Pierce.
And he has his own Spell Pierce back. This is going to get him. This is going to get Devon. I think if you play out the counter war, I believe Tom ends up on top.
It's Force of Will time on the Invigorate. And he's going to remove the Daze. And actually, I don't think that Tom's going to win this counter war again, because there's a land in the graveyard now to be able to pay for Spell Pierce.
You're right.
Deathrite Shaman. And that's, I think, the big issue.
So he can actually pay.
But here's the thing. If you're Tom, this is a situation where you force your opponent to have Force of Will, because if they don't, they die. And if you lose this counter war, it's not the situation where it's like, oh, I'm at 3, I lose the counter war, I lose. The situation where if he loses the counter war, we just get to keep playing. If he wins with this Invigorate, the game is over.
And actually, Tom may just, and this is a fun term, Spell Pierce for value here, and that knowing Devon can pay 2 mana, that's fine. It means Devon doesn't activate Deathrite, and Devon loses the land in the graveyard. Like, those are 2 pretty big costs.
So the Force Will takes care of the Invigorate. And he's going to activate Deathrite Shaman to take care of the Vine to the Vast with there. So Ross is going to go down 2 more. He's going to go down to 12. But again, it's on O'Donnell to have the counterspell in that situation so he doesn't die. The game still continues, and right now it still favors Ross. An attack here for 3 is going to put Ross down to 9. So it's certainly tightening up at this point.
Well, yeah, with that second land drawn by O'Donnell means he represents 8 damage in these Deathrite Shamans.
The draw there for Ross was a copy of Misty Rainforest.
Cracking that fetch land is not free for Tom Ross.
No.
Whether he wants to do it, that's a really interesting question.
There's an attack. Will Tom maybe try to move in with Vines here?
Yeah, he could move with Vines. He could also just lead back some mana for Inkmoth to block the Delver.
Yeah. See, and it's so funny because we get to look over here. Yeah. So we see that, okay, if Tom leaves back the ability to just activate the Inkmoth Nexus, chump block the Delver, he'll probably end the game at 1. And then it's just, okay, just 2 more of the Blight Agent, that's going to do it. But it's pretty compelling when your opponent Force of Will is your Invigorate the last turn, and you don't know the contents of their hand, and the Force of Will that you saw was from the Delver flipping, to just say, I'd go for it. See, what's the worst that could happen?
Well, he doesn't know that wasn't that Force of Will.
I know that. That's the point. The
Force
of Will that he saw, the Force of Will that was cast is the Force of Will that he saw. So it would be very compelling for him to just say, I'm going to go for it and try to kill you. But he's not going to do that. You see the 2 damage is resolved. It's up to 8, in fact, now. And I think he might be on the plan that you just mentioned, Matthias, which is just chump block this turn with the Inkmoth Nexus on the Delver. I just kill you next turn.
Yeah, it's on board. He doesn't have you. He needs a kill spell. And if Devon plays a kill spell of any kind, he likely does not have enough mana to kill Tom with Deathrites. It would have to be Disfigure. Or land, if Devon has a Disfigure here, then Tom loses.
Though,
I don't know. Spell Pierce.
There's Spell Pierce, and he has Vines in his hand, so it gets a little bit more complicated depending on the sequencing on both sides of the table. So by no means does this game end on the next turn. We'll see what happens now that turn is here.
So he's using Vines and Spell Pierce to protect his Inkmoth Nexus as opposed to using them to push through damage.
Now that was an interesting draw.
It is.
A copy of Pithing Needle. But again, if he plays a Pithing Needle this turn, if he plays Pithing Needle this turn, Tom is probably going to have to fight over this with Spell Pierce. Pivot Needle may have been the perfect top deck.
No, because Devon's short a land.
Also, he can activate the Inkmoth Nexus in response. Yeah, okay.
Even so, Devon's short a land to kill him on board, right? He'd have to pay 2. He'd have an untapped Death Ray and a Delver, but he wouldn't have the mana to activate the Death Ray. Yeah, Tom immediately we'll get that Inkmoth fired up in response.
Yep. Because all it needs to do is block this one turn. That's it.
And I think this is game 2 for Tom Ross.
I think it is looking that way. Again, Needle's going to come into play. We'll get confirmation on what Devon names here in just a moment.
So he's still deciding what to name. I don't... Yeah, that was the other thing. Now that it resolved, he's going to name Misty Rainforest.
That's okay, though. There's the block.
It is the right card to name, right? If your opponent's priced into chumping with Inkmoth, why name it? There aren't going to be any left.
But Tom can just say attack you and try to kill you, and he's got a Vines as backup. He drew another Vines, so that's going to take care of it. And game number 2 goes to Tom the Boss Ross over Devon O'Donnell. Infect moves on to 2-0 over Bug Delver, and for Tom, he's got one more to go.
Just unbeatable in invitational top 8s. Tom Ross just 3-0s everybody.
I guess that's the case. I mean, we'll see if O'Donnell can try to rally here a little bit. Again, you take a look at the deck list, and of course, we have them in front of us, and you guys can go to the StarCityGames.com coverage page to take a look at them, just as the players are doing right now. You can see how difficult the matchup is here for O'Donnell. He doesn't have a lot of great ways to interact like maybe a Shardless Bug deck would do. We talked about 2 cards that were huge when we watched Tom lose to Jerry Thompson early in the tournament. He was playing Shardless Bug. Baleful Strix, Liliana Veil. Both are not present here.
Yeah, those cards, I mean, that's a completely different strategy. It's one where you grind down your opponent's resources. And one of the weaknesses of Infect is that you're playing a bunch of pump spells. And, like, pump spells are inherently not very good in an Eternal format like Legacy because they just require a lot to do something, right? They require you, first of all, to have a creature in play and that creature to be alive. And by and large, creature combat doesn't happen all that often. There's a lot of ifs for pump spells to do something. So when you can just grind your opponent down on resources, you leave them with a lot of really mediocre cards. That's why Shardless Bug seems pretty good here. But Bug Delver it can't grind. So I think its game plans are it can race or it can tempo its opponents. And I think the tempo one is actually the preferred game plan. You know, Devon had an option there, and maybe the plan doesn't work. Maybe he doesn't have all the right tools, though, to just like wasteland and daze and stifle his opponents out of the game. And I'm not sure if I'm going so far as to keep in Stifle. I'm pretty sure Devon's boarded them out. But there's an argument to just trying to, especially when you're on the play, trying to not let Tom play Magic. Get one of those draws where you just kill everything he does and get all his lands.
Now, there's definitely a thought process if you go back and watch that second game there where you and I were just saying, you know, I have a Deathrite Shaman, I've got this Abrupticate for this Noble Hierarch, and I've just seen your hand, I would fire off and take care of that thing. Is the game different there? It's kind of tough to say. You know, Tom took a long time to draw colored sources. His lands were a couple copies of Inkmoth Nexus before he found a tropical island and crop rotated for a land and all that good stuff. So that Noble Hierarch stayed alive maybe a lot longer than you and I expected, especially when the Vines of the Vastwood showed up too.
Yeah, well, what did it for me was I think Devon gave Tom time to cast Blighted Agent. He gave him a window in which to do it. And then the fact that Tom had Noble Hierarch plus Blighted Agent, a card which Devon actually couldn't race, meant that in 5 swings, Tom just won. Yeah, so the best plan, because if he can't kill this flurry of Infect creatures, his best line is to kill Tom's mana and ability to cast the creatures.
Compelling first 2 games there. Now, of course, after this one is over, well, we got another great match for you guys. Reed Duke, maybe you've heard of him. And if you haven't, I don't know what you do. Maybe you're under a rock or something. I have no idea. He's playing Blue-White Miracles. He's going to be playing against Peter Ingram. Now, we talk about Reed all the time, and it's hard not to. He's one of the best Magic players in the world today. Reed won Grand Prix Miami last year.
Yes, he did.
He beat Josh McClain in the finals. Epic match. But Reed ended up being victorious. Now, one thing you may forget about that tournament is there were a couple of other fantastic players in the top 8 of that tournament, among them Peter Ingram. Now, they didn't butt heads, but they were in the top 8. And, you know, Ingram is this name where, you know, if you play a lot of Magic, maybe you know who he is. You know, he just won a PTQ 2 weeks ago to get back on the Pro Tour with Malirapod. He's got a couple Grand Prix top 8s underneath his belt, a couple Grand Prix, you know, top 16, some money finishes, does well here on the Open Series, top 8 at this Invitational. He is no slouch. Now, do I think he's the favorite of the matchup? Well, probably not. It's redo. But that's our matchup after this. And that's going to be a lot of fun to watch as well as Game 3 has begun.
All right. So O'Donnell's on the play again here. We're going to see what strategy he's pursuing. Both players, fortunately, have kept a lot of 7s. And his turn 1 Delver, this is the kind of start I like here. So it just races.
It just gets the game started, I think, the way that you want to get it started. You know, I don't think he would mind, Devon, if he started with a Deathrite Shaman, but I think, you know, in a perfect world, I think he gets like a Delver draw going, and you can actually see in his hand he's got 2 copies of Wasteland, so we can kind of see that Delver tempo we draw this game.
Great, Delver into Wasteland. That, on the play, Delver into Wastelands is a pretty good formula for the entire metagame, and Tom just disassembles it.
Oh, no. Tommy, the Piracy Charm to blow up this draw?
Didn't see that one coming, but you know.
You and I both.
So Piracy Charm.
Legacy staple.
Legacy staple Piracy Charm. Gives a creature +2/-1, so it kills 1 power guy, 1 toughness guys, and it can make players discard a card. And people don't really pick the other one on it. But
target creature gains Land Walk.
Yeah,
sometimes you got to slide on through. Here's a Ponder after a Wasteland from O'Donnell. That's the one of Piracy Charm, by the way.
Out of the board. All right.
And
that's such an ambitious card to board in that. Like, is that even live a lot of the time? Like, obviously, it's great against turn 1 Delvers. Don't get me wrong.
Looks good now.
It was real good there.
Yeah. Now, Tom, the texture of Tom's hand is not great at this point. Besides that, he has an Inkmoth next. I believe that's his only other land. So we'll see what he can cobble together as O'Donnell's going to resolve this Ponder. But you can tell his plan this game was the Delver game. Play a Delver, I'll Wasteland you once, I'll Wasteland you again, and hopefully my Delver flips right away, and 3-3-3-3-3, and we're moving on to game number 4. But it doesn't look like that thing's broke his way as he draws a mystery card off a Ponder.
Yeah, I mean, he had to shuffle off the Ponder, so that's, you know, some bad beats for Devon. Ideally, he would just, like, find another Delver and, you know, continue doing the ridiculous Delver thing where you just do everything.
Now, Donald does have another Wasteland in his hand, and we'll see if he wants to fire that off, or he can play that Tropical Island, get a Tarmogoyf on the table, and get started, and that's exactly what it looks like he's going to do. We'll see if Tom has a card like Force of Will as he takes a look at the graveyard to see how big Tarmogoyf is, and if this resolves, we will get our Tarmogoyf die on the screen, and it looks to be a 4/5 at this point. Creature, land, sorcery, and instant, and here comes Inkmoth Nexus. So the race, well, it's certainly on.
Yeah. Tom with 2 lands, but they're both colorless. And this time, the race is actually like, this race goes in favor for Devon.
Oh, yeah. O'Donnell is certainly ahead in the race right now. You see the Wasteland take care of the Inkmoth Nexus. Tarmogoyf coming in for 4 damage a turn now. So, gotta like where O'Donnell's at in this game. Even though the Piracy Charm was a bit of a beating, here's a Gitaxian Probe. So Devon's going to display his hand. We're going to see a Brainstorm, 2 copies of Toxic Deluge, and a Verdant Catacombs. Not surprised to see the Deluges in his deck.
You know, Toxic Deluge, pretty good. His entire opponent's deck is full of 1 toughness creatures, not to mention the fact that the alternative cost of Deluge is paying life, which you just don't care about. I think the best part of his hand is that the remaining 2 cards are Brainstorm and Fetchland, so his hand has pretty much anything in it.
Another attack here for 4. Ross is down to 9. It may be Brainstorm time as Devon figures out what land to do it with. He's actually going to go with a Ponder. So we'll take a look at the top 3 first. Thoughtseize among them. There's also Deathrite Shaman and a Disfigure. Really can't ask for much more.
Pretty good hand here. I'd be surprised if Devon ends up letting this game go. Deathrite Shaman increases the clock by 1 turn, and Disfigure cuts off another draw for Tom. I think he wants both of them.
Yeah, there's Deathrite. You see him play the land first, make sure everything is kosher. Draw. A Force of Will does Ross. He will discard the Viridian Corruptor and pass the turn back. O'Donnell's going to draw a copy of Thoughtseize. Maybe Tom concedes in response to this?
I would. I don't think you can win here. But is there anything in his hand worth protecting? Does he already know about all of them? Yeah,
okay. I'll show it off. So what you guys will see at home there is a Force of Will, a Brainstorm. 2 copies of Vines of the Vastwood, a Ponder, a Glistener Elf, and the Mighty Berserk.
Yeah, there is some info that Tom just gave here. He let his opponent know that indeed he kept the Berserks in.
Yep.
We haven't seen that cast yet. We've seen everything else cast post-board, so. I'm not sure if there's actually an out, by the way, that Tom is playing to. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it exists in this situation. There goes the Ponder. Here's an attack. Ross going to go a little bit lower here. He's going to get 1 more draw step, a copy of Inkmoth Nexus. He will deploy that or pass the turn back to O'Donnell. O'Donnell will sacrifice the Verdant Catacombs.
I noticed this before. Tom, one of the players who definitely ascribes the school of philosophy of never concede.
Yeah.
Which...
And really why? Your elimination rounds. If the Thoughtseize was protecting some information that Tom thought was relevant, I imagine he would have hidden that. There's an attack. There's a block. That's a disfigure. Get that out of the way, and that is going to do it. So Devon O'Donnell is going to win a game number 3 here against Tom Ross. And these gentlemen, well, they're headed to game number 4, and that means Ross will be on the play.
All right, so Devon O'Donnell gets himself on the scoreboard. That was the easy game. That was the one where he is on the play. Those kind of draws, Delver into multiple wastelands, are pretty, I would say they're like 80% against the entire field of Legacy. It's just so hard for many decks to interact with that. You just never let them play. By the time they're playing, they're at 10, and you have 2 creatures in play. But when on the draw, Devon is probably the slower deck here. Tom's just as fast as the Delver deck. So he's going to need either Tom to have some slower starts, or he's going to need some of that 1-mana removal to bridge the gap of when Tom's on the play, to get him to bridge the gap to his own creatures.
One thing to note here, as both players are taking a look at each other's deck lists yet again, is Tom, after that game, didn't do really very much. The Piracy Charm was pretty cute, but ends up getting crushed there. He immediately goes back to the drawing board. He's siding stuff in very quickly, siding stuff out very quickly. I imagine he has a configuration that he likes very much on the play versus what he likes on the draw.
That's definitely true. Piracy Charm, to me, one of those cards that may only come in on the draw to stop draws like that.
Yep.
Obviously Devon still got him, but say Devon's draw didn't have a bunch of wastelands in it. Maybe it was like he does have draws that are all in on a turn 1 Delver flipping.
So again, Ross is going to be on the plate here for game number 4. The reigning invitational champion is looking to go back-to-back here. O'Donnell has a very difficult matchup in front of him, but he was able to get game number 3. We'll see if he can get game number 4 and really make things interesting. Tom got to see the copies of Toxic Deluge in his deck. Not much of a surprise to see those there, but confirmation certainly doesn't hurt.
Yeah, Toxic Deluge is pretty good in this matchup. We have seen boards where it just feels like Devon can't do a thing, and that's when Tom has just kind of played creature, followed by creature, followed by creature.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's the only sweeper in his 75.
And take that first game, for example, where Tom just kind of loaded up with the infect threats.
Yeah. The pump spells, it's interesting, because cards like Vines, I imagine this matchup, Vines is cast unkicked more often than it's cast kicked.
Yeah, I actually would be surprised if he kicks it, really at all in this matchup. It just seems like a single green mana counter disfigure. Wouldn't surprise me if that's actually the use of the card in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, if Devon's not racing, if we're on a board state where Devon isn't racing, then Tom doesn't need to pump his creatures. His creatures naturally have double strike thanks to infect, so they usually win races without help.
Well, both players are happy with their configurations, and so they will shuffle up again. Tom Ross in the quarterfinals took down Rookie of the Year Jared Betcher 3-0 in the Sneak and Show versus Infect matchup. And Devon O'Donnell took down William Cruz in a bit of a Delver mirror there. O'Donnell playing Bug Delver, Cruz playing a 4-color Delver deck with Young Pyromancer and Deathrite Shaman kind of on the splash. O'Donnell was able to take that one down 3-1, and now here we are in game number 4 of our semifinals.
Yeah, that matchup was actually particularly interesting. Devon lost game 1 in it, but thanks to his sideboard, took consecutively all of the sideboarded games.
Yeah, there was a write-up about that match by Nick Miller. If you guys haven't had the opportunity to read it, you can definitely find out how O'Donnell did win that matchup against Cruz, who, to his credit, had a fantastic tournament. He was our lone undefeated player working his way through day 2 after starting off 8-0 and then beat Reed Duke in the undefeated match to start off his second day. So impressive stuff for Devon, or excuse me, for William.
Yeah. So, do you think I'm looking at the Bug Delver deck so we see that Tom Ross re-sideboards on the play and draw. Question to be whether or not Bug Delver can do the same thing. And my guess is no. I think he just has a lot of cards that don't do much here. There's an argument to be made for going on a stifle plan when you're on the play. I certainly wouldn't want to do it on the draw.
I wouldn't want to do it on the draw either, especially because your opponent and Ross has the ability to play around it relatively easily.
Yeah, it would just be for his fetch lands.
Yep.
You'd be hoping that, because Ross's deck keeps a lot of 1 and 2 landers.
And he has demonstrated that, as he does keep his 7 cards. O'Donnell looks not thrilled to keep his hand, but it looks like he's going to keep it. Ross with a Trop, and here's a Glistener Elf. And the pressure is already out there.
O'Donnell's hand has some good weapons. He has Pithing Needle and Disfigure in his hand. I'm not positive he has the black mana for Disfigure. We'll see that. O'Donnell's going to go for Probe, and Tom's thinking.
Oh, boy. Tom's got a daze, and he is giving it serious consideration.
This is where you got to watch body language, right? If you're showing that your hand is kind of borderline and you need this draw, you might just get a daze.
Yeah, think about how O'Donnell looked when he kept his hand. He kind of didn't look like he was happy to keep it. He just shrugged and decided to keep it.
I have done that a fair times when I've been playing Ponders. It's like you can use body language to decide whether or not your opponent counters your Ponders or not.
Here's an attack. Will O'Donnell trade? Absolutely not.
I would have thought that Devon would trade.
I'm a little surprised as well.
Yeah.
And no flip of the Delver, but a draw of a Wasteland. So we'll see if he wants to fire that off.
Well, Devon, the scary part of his hand is Devon kept a one-land Ponder hand. So now he has Wasteland. He has some options. He can play Tarmogoyf. He can play Ponder and waste the Trop.
Mm-hmm. He's going to get the big Lurgoyf out there.
Yeah, I like the play.
And now Delver. Delver's going to hang tough.
It's actually interesting. So this Glistener Elf for Delver trade that Tom offered, then you have to ask, both these decks are playing 14 creatures. Which deck values their creatures more? And so I'm not positive. It's close,
Yeah. Here's a Brainstorm. You see Tom play the fetch land first. Now 3 cards coming for him, and Invigorate, a Noble Hierarch, and another Misty Rainforest among them. So now Ross will decide how he wants to move forward here. He's going to be able to put 2 cards back in, make it a perfect Brainstorm with the fetch land. O'Donnell's got that 2-3 out there in the way in Tarmogoyf. The Delver, we'll see if it wants to trade this go around in case Ross does attack.
Tarmogoyf good on this specific board due to the fact that all of Tom's Infectors are Glistener Elves. A lot of times Tarmogoyf can be less than thrilling here, but the fact that Devon has one, and I believe he has a replacement one, and another one in his hand, could be a pretty big wall for Tom to get through.
Yeah, Goyf up to a 3-4 now, as there's a land in the graveyard to go along with an instant, and a sorcery in Gataxian Probe. Ross going to figure out what land he wants to get out of his deck. Again, he's got a Brainstorm, a Noble Hierarch, an Invigorate, and it looks like a Vines of Vastwood in his hand. So he's going to go buy a Trop. He's going to go get himself a Savannah. Again, maybe searching up that Savannah with the thought process of maybe he will value this very highly and try to wasteland that instead of my tropical island. A lot to think about when you're playing against Infect.
And Noble Hierarch was Tom's play. It's interesting right now because I was going to say, unless this Delver flips, like Devon has a good defense built up, but he doesn't have a good offense. And I think that Delver is going to start to turn sideways now.
He's got a good offense and a good defense now.
Yeah.
Second Tarmogoyf, and now Delver's coming in the air.
No third land for O'Donnell, and no black mana source. You see, he does have a Disfigure. He flipped Spell Pierce that Tom knows about as well. So Devon has the better board, but Tom is definitely firing on more cylinders now.
Yeah, and that Brainstorm's a pretty good one. He found a Blighted Age and Inkmoth Nexus in a daze, and with that, his draw for the turn was a copy of Swords to Plowshares. So I was a little curious as to why he searched for that Savannah. Again, maybe he was using that as bait because he wanted to keep his Trop. But now that we know that Swords are in his deck, and really that's not too surprising as there are definitely creatures worth killing, it all makes more sense now.
I mean, Swords is excellent in an Infect deck. What, you kill their guy and give them some life points? Yeah, great.
Tom is a very nice individual between Swords and Invigorate. Wants to make sure that you're at a healthy life total.
It's very... You can cast all those Taxing Probes you'd want.
Chances are Devon would be able to Toxic Deluge for more than 20 if he wanted to.
Yeah, just make sure, no matter how many Invigorates Tom has, that you're going to Toxic Deluge and kill everything.
Absolutely. Tom going to play Nexus. And the Blighted Agent.
This is the board state that has one Tom Ross games 1 and 2, where he just played a bunch of things. And I was going to say, both games were really punched by the fact that Devon did not have a copy of Toxic Deluge either of those games. Now, he doesn't have the black mana source, but his draw for the turn was the Toxic Deluge.
And here's a Ponder. Now, he won't be able to cast Deluge on this turn. And there's a Sword to take care of the Delver. But if he finds a black mana, he does have a Disfigure in his hand. So let's see if O'Donnell's going to make a move here.
Yeah, he needs to find a fetch land here. If not, there's some risk that Tom will just dump pump spells onto this Blighted Agent. And fortunately for O'Donnell, he's in luck. Verdant Catacombs is in these top 3. I like this game for Devon right now.
This game is close. Again, Tom has an Invigorate on top of his deck that he put back. And we know he's got Vines looming somewhere. So he could kill O'Donnell out of nowhere. The question is, would he go for it?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so he can 10 him with the Blighted Agent.
Mm-hmm. Let's see what this is going to be. That's going to be the Needle. And I imagine that'll be on Inkmoth Nexus, but again, we will get confirmation as soon as we do know.
If Tom goes for it, he's gonna not deal lethal thanks to Disfigure. Tom right now could swing a Blight Agent for 10. In fact, if he uses all his spells, Devon could shrink it to an 8 and he'd go to 9 poison.
Well, the problem with that, right, is he invigorates, and then I guess in response to the Vines, he would Disfigure. Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, assuming Devon plays it correctly. Okay. And what that means is that Devon would be at 9 and then be able to untap and Toxic Deluge. The winning line here is if... Well, we'll see, yeah.
The winning line is Tom is moving in.
Tom is moving in.
That's what's happening here.
I would say if Tom had the ability to fight a counter war over the Deluge, this would be pretty easy
and this doesn't actually surprise me at all that Devon is responding to this. And I think Tom has played this deck so much and he knows that his opponent's going to respond to this. He's going to try to Disfigure. Tom is going to say, absolutely not. Vines with Kicker right now. And that is going to be more than enough to get it done. Because Devon doesn't have Force of Will. He doesn't have a blue card. It's a Spell Pierce in his hand, but that's not going to do it because he's tapped out. And he's going to extend the hand. Tom Ross wins this match over Devon O'Donnell. 3-1. And for the boss, he is in the finals again.